Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at 3 mistakes Scorpios make in relationships. I hope everyone knows that this is kind of a generalization, and we have so many influences in our chart that kind of create balances. And it's not like it's usually not something that blatant, but it can show up even if it's kind of toned down a little bit. It still is worth looking at. Plus, it's kind of fun just to explore these issues because there may be a grain of truth in here for you if you're listening for yourself or even for the person that you love who happens to be a Scorpio. Okay, number one, keeping tabs on someone will prevent them from leaving you. Scorpio is infamous for being highly suspicious, and they're the type of people to look at their partner's phone, computer tabs, whatever other ways there are of kind of spying on their partner or making sure that their partner is doing what they want them to do. Like maybe they call them multiple times a day, but there's like this suspicious nature. And if you really get to the bottom of it, it's usually because the Scorpio person in general feels like everyone is kind of like having a double life or keeping secrets. Sometimes this is a projection, and maybe that Scorpio person is actually doing the dirt. But regardless, this makes for a lot of problematic behavior in certain Scorpios. Of course, this is about trust. And so Scorpio as a sign tends to have trust issues. And I'm not going to go too far into that. I will say that I do think that Scorpio people come into this lifetime with a lot of emotional, I don't know if I'd say baggage, but they may have a lot to deal with. They may develop a lot of emotional baggage because of what they have to deal with growing up. Life for them is usually, even if they're born into wealth, but their life is usually fraught with a lot of drama, and some of it might be kind of behind the scenes or boiling, beneath the surface. And it's not just, so blatant. So there's like a lot of subtlety to it sometimes, but it can be there. And then they can take that with them and bring it to adulthood. So I think Scorpio is a very complex sign, and it has a lot of powerful elements to it. The only thing is that Scorpio has to understand that when they do these kinds of behaviors, they actually are more likely to make the other person run for the hills. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're trying to control and they're trying to prevent themselves from being abandoned. That's probably one of your greatest fears. But you have to make sure that you're not unwittingly bringing it on yourself with this kind of behavior. By learning how to trust, and I'm not saying it's that simple that it happens with the snap of a finger. Sometimes people have been so betrayed in life that maybe they need a therapist. Maybe they need a healer who can, or like even like a spiritual teacher who can help them to learn to come back to themselves so that they're not looking to their partner to be their end all be all. Because if someone is afraid of somebody else cheating on them or betraying them in some other way, it's because they're really so emotionally invested in that person that they feel like they need that relationship. That if they didn't have that relationship, it would just be curtains for them. And that's not true. You have yourself. And the more you can feel safe with yourself and know that you will always be okay, the less you're going to feel the need to do those kinds of self-defeating behaviors that are also, giving another person this, sending another person this message that you find them untrustworthy. And they may feel very uncomfortable if they're always being tested. They may feel that they may actually say, you know what? If she's going to always question me or, give me the third degree, maybe I should just go ahead and do what she's afraid of, because what's the difference? She thinks I'm doing it anyway, so why not? And, here's another thing. I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but I think sometimes people are like strangely drawn to the very people that would do that to them. I don't know that this is something that would be really strong with Scorpio as a sign, but if you are, because the reason I'm saying this is because you might be saying to me, well, my partner was doing some sketchy stuff. Am I supposed to just act like an idiot and just accept it, that they're coming home at like 2 in the morning and they don't have any explanation, or they said they were going to come home earlier? I'm supposed to just accept that? No, I'm not saying that at all. But in that case, it really isn't about like putting trust in someone that maybe is deserving of that trust, because they're showing you what they are all about by their behavior. We're talking about people that are trustworthy, but you still can't get it out of your head that maybe they're doing something and you just don't know about it. Okay, number 2. The second biggest mistake I think Scorpios make in relationships is that being invulnerable is being powerful. Scorpio is a sign that tends to despise vulnerability in themselves and in others. They see it as weakness. And Scorpio, probably because of that the Pluto influence, but I was going to say maybe Mars as well, but Pluto is one of the co-rulers of Scorpio, and it is about power. But sometimes it can be toxic types of power. When we're talking about intimate relationships, we're talking about relationships that are not on the surface, that are not for show. And when you're in an intimate relationship, it's not just intimacy is not about having sex. Yeah, you can have sex with, in a one night stand, and it's not really truly intimate. It could be, even if it's very brief, you could bare your soul to a stranger, I guess. But what I'm talking about is being able to show up to another person and not have to act like you have it all together, that you just have perfect confidence, you don't have any fears and all of that. That you're able to say to someone, I'm really afraid of this, or I'm really afraid of that. Now, the reason that Scorpio doesn't want to do that is because you, again, due to trust issues, you might feel like if I say this, they're going to store that information and they're either going to throw it in my face when we have an argument and twist it around and use it against me, or they're going to, tell other people my deepest, darkest secrets that I only wanted them to know. So it's not trusting that your information is safe with another person. I mean, in terms of your vulnerabilities. Now, I think this all boils down to the issue of secrecy, which is very strong with Scorpio. It's just kind of like a defense mechanism or a protective device where the Scorpio person feels like, Scorpio's a water sign, so emotions run high. And even though Scorpio's ruled by two pretty fierce planets, Mars and Pluto, a Scorpio person can still feel or fear that their emotions are something that can be toyed with by another person. And so they can be very afraid of sharing them. Now, the problem is when you don't do that, what happens? The relationship stays superficial. And another thing, too, is because Scorpio does tend to be a very complex sign, it's going to take a special person to really understand you, to get you. A lot of people fear Scorpios for good reason because of that complexity. And Scorpio, that sting of the Scorpio can be very real. And the lower nature of Scorpio, or you could say the less developed Scorpio people, can actually be quite vengeful. If they have been hurt in life, they can kind of lash out at other people and even be very vindictive maybe even in a very premeditated way. So it's important that a Scorpio person develops trust and understands the importance of trusting their partner so that they can become softer because of those ruling planets being kind of harsh. They need to balance it out with that inner softness so that they can receive. It's not about receiving sympathy, more like empathy. Sympathy is kind of like pity. And that's not something that Scorpio ever wants, but kind of like this empathy where somebody knows where they're coming from. So it's kind of like if you have had this trauma in life and you share it with your partner. Let me give an example because this can be actually quite accurate with Scorpio. Scorpio in the 8th house, it can be the shadow self, and it can be, sex is connected to the 8th house, but I think it's like the dark side of sex sometimes, and it can be the healing side when the person is more conscious and all of that, but it can be less shame, for instance, with sexual abuse. Let's say a man, let's use a Scorpio male is with a woman and she feels like he's very emotionally inhibited and it makes her feel bad about herself, like she's not attractive. What if that Scorpio man had the guts to tell his partner that when he was younger, he was sexually abused? And so he always has developed this kind of fear around sex. Can you imagine, like, if the woman or if it's a same-sex relationship? I'm just using male and female because it's kind of those what would you call it, the archetypes of the different types of energies. But anyway, what if the other person was like, oh my gosh, this person is so brave and I didn't know this side to them. Oh my gosh, and they were so, they felt so honored that you were able to share that with them and that you trusted them enough to say it. So there's a saying, you're only as sick as your secrets. And sunlight is the best disinfectant. That's another one that they say, because some people are trying to protect themselves by being closed in emotionally and keeping other people at bay. And certainly you do have to be selective. You don't, some people, they tell they air their dirty laundry with anybody and they're not discriminating. That's not wise. So I'm not saying that you just say it to anybody, but the point is that you do have this understanding that a deep relationship requires that you are able to open up. Number 3, that obsession is love. And, the stereotypical Scorpio is like the stalker, the person who gets obsessed with somebody. Now, if you think about what obsession is control. Obsession is not love. It never was and it never will be. Now, this is not to say that every Scorpio person is a potential stalker or anything like that. Obviously not. But the truth is that Scorpio is a very extreme sign as far as I'm concerned from the perspective of how you express emotions. I think it's exceedingly rare to find a Scorpio person who is mixed on something. Either you're completely for it or you're against it. If somebody is dealing with a Scorpio person and that Scorpio person shows indifference, forget about it, because that means that they are just not that into you. But it's almost like you don't exist. But the person that they latch onto is somebody that must really strike a chord in them. And that's fine. But you have to be able to moderate your emotions, because you tend to have very, very strong, like scarily strong emotions. And that can make you more likely to love in an extreme way. It's so funny because I think the video, it's funny, the hits that I have the most of are all Scorpionic. And one of the top ones is Venus and Scorpio. And so I was talking about this very thing because, whether your sun is in Scorpio, your Venus, your Mars, all of these personal planets, even the rising sign, which isn't a planet, but it still can give off some of those same themes. There's slight differences in how they express themselves, but there's still going to be similar themes. And I was talking about this idea that Scorpio does tend to be very obsessive and extreme with their relationships. And somebody said to me, it's not that we are obsessive, it's that we expect, if we are giving a lot to this relationship, that the other person will too. And what I think I responded to that comment was, you can't have expectations about how somebody else loves you or likes you. That's the problem right there, is that, thinking somebody is entitled to something because they're giving off. It's like you thinking that if you love somebody so deeply that you're going to get that same kind of love reflected back onto you. And really, then it becomes giving to get, I think, at a certain level, but it's also not realizing that that is not love, that's control. It's okay, you can love somebody with the depth of your soul and then just leave it there. If they choose to accept your version of love, that's awesome. But they may give love back to you in a way that you may think is weak sauce. You may question it. You may not think it's good enough. And, maybe in some cases it is kind of one-sided. So in that situation, if you notice that that person doesn't seem to be that into you, the answer is not to double down. That's where people get obsessive. Again, I think that trauma is at the root of this sometimes, or a lot of times, because the person is, a person who is obsessive, they do tend to, they're fixated. That's what, we talk about fixed signs, tend to be obsessed with things because they're very attached to them. And the problem is that there has to be more detachment. Otherwise, the love is overbearing, can be smothering. And a lot of people will not vibrate with that. And it really isn't a type of relationship. You want to learn how to become more detached. And that does not mean that you become indifferent. It means that you're able to see the other person as a whole other person. Like you're not a two-headed monster because you're in a relationship. They have their own soul and their own self and their own goals, and you have yours as well. And you're coming together and you're building something together, but you still retain your individuality and your free will. You know, there was that cheesy saying in the 70s, and there was a poster that went along with it. You know, if something is meant to be, you know, and you put it in your hand and then I forgot how it goes, but you let it go. If it's meant to be, it'll come back and all of that. And that's kind of like true about love. The more you try to hold on to it, the more elusive it can be. And even for those people, some people, if you're listening, if this isn't you, but a person, maybe it's your ex that you were with or somebody you're currently with, you may have made the mistake of thinking that their obsession was love. And then you realized how oppressive it was. Obsession is oppressive. So the more you're able to love deeply and let freely, and there's like this sense of, you know, you're not like in need of that person being exactly how you want them to be, and you trust them implicitly. You know that they're not going to cheat on you. Then you have that sense of comfort. If you don't feel that way, you're not necessarily crazy. You might be with somebody who is showing signs that they're not trustworthy. But but in that situation, the answer is to make a decision. Are you willing to be in that type of relationship, or do you think that you deserve better? But becoming obsessed and is really trying to control them and get them to do what you want to do. And that is not empowering for you. That's what I was trying to say about, talking about when you're vulnerable, you're actually powerful. And also the first point I made about, when you don't trust someone, you're actually giving away your power in those instances. So the more that you cultivate your own personal power, the less likely you are to be chasing after someone, trying to catch them in the act, trying to prove that they're doing something secretly against you and all of that. Because you're going to be standing in your power, you're going to be radiating confidence, and you know that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. All right, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, you can click on the link below for more details. Thanks for listening. Bye.